Hi, I'm Kenny Bass. Welcome to Beyond the Podium. Joining me is West Virginia Gubernatorial candidate, two-term Secretary of State, Mike Warner. Thanks for coming by.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you stopping by to talk about some of the issues. We'll go ahead and get started. 23 years U.S. Army.
Yes.
That's your background. What did you learn about life and yourself, and what has helped shape you about your service in the military?
The military trains you to not how to think, or not what to think, but how to think. And so, starting with Beast Barracks at West Point, they teach you the time management. They teach you about how to organize things. And so in the military, in particular, you have staffs. And so the one shop is personnel, 2 is intelligence, 3 is operations, 4 is logistics. And so that's what you need to get pretty much anything done, is a will to do it, and then the training and the resources to get something done. So that's applied throughout the military. I've applied it in my job as Secretary of State. And the other aspect of that is staffing, and that is using the staff. If you surround yourself with good people, and then you let each one of them take a look at it. It could be your chief of staff, it could be your lawyer, it could be the people throughout the organization that have expertise. That's what I've done. I think for the first year in office as Secretary of State, that drove some people crazy, because the lawyer thinks that they can write the best thing, your chief of staff thinks that they know the personnel the best and everything. But when you put it through each one of those sections, you come out with a better product. It's one of those 2 heads is better than one sort of thing. So those are some of the aspects that the military taught me that I continue to bring into state government today.
So process type things.
Exactly.
How about personally? Were you always geared for that lifestyle, pretty disciplined, self-disciplined? I know you have a history of that in your family, so that was always a way that you were going to move? I
do. From sports teams and bringing folks together I was the president of my high school class there at George Washington High School. I was a congressional page. I then went into West Point. I was an Eagle Scout. So all those things put you in positions to lead and organize and team build, and I've continued that throughout my life.
I'm going to ask you some softball questions to get started right off your website. How do you build a great economy?
Well, you start by first educating people, and I'm going to be the education governor. When you start with education, and I'm talking about the early childhood education, getting people prepared. We have to have students learning to read by the 3rd grade at grade level, because you have to be able to read before you then, after 3rd grade, you're reading to learn. So think about it with physics, geography, history, any of that sort of thing. You have to be able to read. Well, once we've done that at the early education and then out through middle school and high school, then we have somebody that's ready to go into the job, to the workforce. And we have people in the workforce. Now you can start building an economy. They can start their own businesses, become entrepreneurs. That's how you build an economy, starting with early childhood education.
You talk about empowering coal and energy producers. I know probably where you're going with that, but how do you empower them, especially in a political atmosphere, frankly, where the current administration is doing everything it can to bring in green energy into the picture, which is needed and used, but it's certainly not ready for the grid. It's just not technologically ready, and it won't be for maybe decades. So what do you do to make sure that coal and natural gas remain viable, other than the fact that it's desperately needed and critical to a system that would collapse without it?
Well, you have reliable fuel, not renewable, reliable and unreliable. And so coal, oil, and gas are the reliable fuels. So we're always going to need that for base generation, for reliability. You think about it, a gas line you can blow up like they did with the Nord Stream gas line. A coal pile, it's hard to attack a coal pile. You can blow it up, they put a bulldozer together, push it back together. And with the met coal and so forth, that's always going to be needed for building steel, and steel is the main ingredient for infrastructure development and so on. So the first thing we need to do is keep Washington off our back. You shouldn't let government determine the winners and losers in an economy. We need all forms of energy, including looking at nuclear, and I'm glad our legislature started to move in that direction. But that's what you do, is you keep government off your back and let the market, or capitalists, let the capitalist market determine the winners and losers in the energy business.
I think when you start talking about other issues that face us, including the opioid crisis, which we've been devastated by, in the beginning of this, there was a big emphasis on the local and the supply here. As it's continued, and we have the situation that we have at the border, I think there's more and more realization, and now it's a talking point where we've got to secure the border, not just for immigration, but obviously to keep the cartels in Mexico and other countries in South America from importing fentanyl, which is just killing people left and right. So what do you do about the border?
I want to answer it with a broader answer and then focus on the border. Again, my military training. I started off as an artillery officer, and in the military they train you. You start engaging the enemy at the first opportunity. You don't wait till he's right up on you at the wire. You start engaging miles out. An artillery piece, the ones I was shooting, you could shoot 18 miles. And to put that piece of steel on a target 18 miles away requires a lot of STEM training, a lot of
I always think about when guys like you say that, 18 miles, Charleston is exit 60. 42 miles away is just past Nitro. And that's your target.
You can be shooting
Crazy.
all kinds of...
I'm sorry for interrupting. It's just, but that gives you a context of, man.
Okay, so we need to engage China. We need to start with the trade embargoes and that sort of thing to get them to stop producing it. Then the shipment across. One of my cousins' nephew is on Border Patrol out there in San Diego with the fast boats, keeping people from bringing that sort of stuff in. We need to work with Mexico, stop the cartels. We need to build the wall. That's the answer. We need to build that wall. I've been down to the wall. I've been down there, and wherever the wall was, you didn't have people coming across. As soon as that wall stopped, there were hundreds of people just flowing across constantly. It was unbelievable. I mean, that really is what's going on.
And that's been multiplied into thousands, exactly. Tens of thousands some days, yeah.
Then transit en route from the wall to Chicago or Detroit, and then down here to West Virginia. So you work with your fellow states, the police and the law enforcement agencies. Then you increase the penalties on that. Our legislature's dealing with that sort of thing. And then you have to recognize we have people who are addicted to drugs, and we need to be able to deal with them with mental health officials, with rehabilitation centers. But the focus needs to be at that stream all the way, bringing it in here before it even gets to the borders of West Virginia.
We've been hearing a lot about defending parents' rights in schools, keeping certain things from parents, not telling them certain things about their own children, parents fighting back. I think being labeled by the Justice Department at one point as domestic terrorists. When you go yell at a school board meeting, I think that happened. It's not the America that I'm familiar with. But you talk about fighting for the rights of parents. What rights are you fighting for, and how do you do that?
Well, in the education business, we have to focus on the child, but who knows that child better than the parents? And so when the parents want to go to those school board meetings and express their desires on what's going to be taught to those children, we need to listen to them. We shouldn't let the FBI and other three-lettered agencies declare them as domestic terrorists. That's part of this hand-waving that occurs with a magician. They're waving over here, but they're doing the dirty work with the other one. We don't want that to happen. Let's not label our churches, our Catholic churches, as domestic terrorists and send FBI agents in there. So we need to focus on the child, and when you focus on the child, you're going to get to the right answer, and who better than the parents to address the needs of the child?
Probably one of the most controversial things about your stance on certain items is the election of 2020. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've got some notes that I want to, it's a long question, but all these facets tie in. It says, your take on the 2020 election, I'm going to break these things up into pieces.
Okay.
First of all, was it rigged?
Yes, it was.
Okay, explain.
Okay. The Hunter Biden laptop, former officials of the CIA, 51 of them signed a letter saying that it was Russian disinformation when it wasn't. And
the hand waving over on this side.
And they knew that it wasn't Russian disinformation. Okay, this was planted by Tony Blinken, our current U.S. Secretary of State. That's what is still aggravating. He planted this seed. He dreamed it up because he knew that Trump was going to use it in the debate against Biden weeks before the election. He purposely put that out to Mike Morrell, a former acting director of the CIA. Mike Morrell then ran with it with Hayden, Brennan, Clapper, Panetta. These names are synonymous with the CIA, and they all signed that letter. And then they put it forth, and the FBI kept their mouth quiet. They had that laptop for 11 months, and they knew it was real, and the FBI did not come out and say that it was not Russian disinformation. So the CIA, these former members, pulled a lie. They pulled a psychological operation on the people of the United States. It was covered up by the FBI, and then together they went to Facebook and told Facebook to suppress it. And this is under Mark Zuckerberg's on the Joe Rogan show admitted that as much, and Mike Morrell admitted all this under testimony, sworn testimony, in front of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan's committee, and he said he did it for the express purpose of helping Biden and hurting Trump. We can't have our three-lettered agencies lying to the American people in presidential elections.
I think that's where you get into the weeds a little bit with people, because when you say an election was rigged, you're not talking about voting machines were altered. You're not talking about ballots were, by the millions. You're talking about operationally certain ways to influence how people might think, because Democrats have been very successful with some methods in elections that Republicans have historically stood against. I'm talking about mail-in voting, so-called ballot harvesting, third-party collection of ballots and drop boxes. Republicans have traditionally been not crazy about that. But if those are legal, how do you motivate Republicans to vote early like the Democrats have done, to get in the game early and to play the game with the rules that are on the field?
The trouble with that, Kenny, is it wasn't legal. Much of it wasn't legal, okay? The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, says the time, manner, and place of elections shall be left to state legislatures. Well, the state legislature in Georgia had never authorized drop boxes. The state legislature in Pennsylvania had never authorized taking ballots 3 days after the election was over. State legislature in Michigan had never said you can send in an absentee ballot without a signature or without an address, and all three of those things happened. So those were votes outside the law. Now, they may not have had laws that specifically address those, so that's the issue that we all need to address with our state legislatures. We need to go back and look at what happened in 2020, clean that mess up. Wisconsin did that. They went back and said no more drop boxes in Wisconsin until the state legislature actually authorizes it. That's what I'm frustrated about. Is it's not just changing a ballot or stuffing a ballot box, it's the entire process. We talked about process earlier in this conversation. Process matters. That's one of the first things they teach you in law school. We need to, it's why you have a Miranda rights in criminal law. You have to read that accused his rights, or if not, you can't use his confession against you. I think if you don't prescribe how a ballot should be entered into the system and it enters outside the law, I don't think that ballot should count, or we should hold the elected official accountable.
I'm going to ask you an easy one here. How do you feel about the elections in West Virginia?
They are great.
Who the chief election officer in West Virginia?
What have we done? We've taken off 400,000 names. Think about that. Since I've been in office, over 400,000 names here in the state of West Virginia have come off the voter registration list. You don't think that adds confidence to our voters out there? That's why we're getting more and more people signing up to run for office, more and more people voting in the elections. We have the best equipment. We have a voter verified paper trail. Our equipment is not connected to the internet. We have results on election night. That's what people want. So that these conspiracy theories don't have time to start. We've got great elections. And I've been called to testify 4 times in front of Congress to brag on our county clerks, the great job that they've done, how we're doing it in West Virginia, because the rest of the country wants to know and to get it done right.
You talk about protecting women's rights, girls' rights. It's a mess right now in this country with differing viewpoints and differing laws on the books. So how do you protect the rights of women and girls while still respecting the rights of people who want to live the way they want to live?
Sure. In the beginning, God. When you start with God, then everything else falls into place. But when you start with man and you think that man creates, the rights, our Declaration of Independence said, all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the next statement that's so important, and it says that to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men. So governments are there to secure the rights, not to give the rights. And so with women, God created man and woman. And so that's what we need to look at. It's why you have an NBA and a WNBA. Men and women are different. And so we need to protect that. We need to protect our young girls. We need to protect our children from child mutilation, from puberty blocking drugs and so forth. Those are decisions people can make after they turn 18 or 21, not pubescent ages.
I plan on asking all the candidates, the 4 major candidates for the Republican nomination for governor, this question about your opponents. So we'll go down one by one, and I'll start with Patrick Morrisey, your fellow member of the Board of, what's it called? Board of Public Works. Yeah, yes. And a Secretary of State, is a 2-term Secretary of State. He's a 3-term, I think, Attorney General.
Yes.
You talked in a previous debate about coming to West Virginia to be an opportunist. You were referring to the Attorney General. He's been here since 2006. I'm a lifelong West Virginian. You lifelong West Virginian.
Yes.
But at what point do we start giving out-of-state people a pass that we give them their Mountaineer card and say, okay, you're a West Virginian? Because he has been here 18 years.
He was born in New York, went to New Jersey, went to schools in New Jersey, private schools, right? He ran for office in New Jersey, ran for Congress and came in 5th out of 5, all right? Now, what do you do at that point? You get out of New Jersey and you look for somewhere else, and he landed in West Virginia. Now, as an Attorney General, he's been effective in certain ways, but he's backed by the Club for Growth, $10 million. Now, why would an out-of-state PAC, anti-Trump PAC, come in and support somebody with $10 million? They don't want him to be governor. They're buying a U.S. Senate seat. See, $10 million is a lot for a governor's seat. Governor Justice only spent $5 million in his race. Why would somebody spend $10 million? Because they're trying to buy a U.S. Senate seat. You see, when you try to buy a Senate seat in Texas or New York or California, we're talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So if they can buy a Senate seat for $10 million in West Virginia by getting him into the governor's seat, then he can appoint himself if something were to happen to the other senators, or he could run for a free shot in 26. That's what they're up to. They're playing chess. The rest of us are down here worried about a governorship. They're trying to get a U.S. Senate seat. So that's the problem I have with Patrick Morrisey. I've called him a carnival barker. He's, hey, look at me. Anything that comes up, he's out there trying to help people on the West Virginia basketball team and all number of things. We need to just calm down and look at what is important to the people of West Virginia, and that's where I'm focused.
I'm probably going to give him a pass on the whole carpetbagger thing. He's 20 years, almost. I'll give you your West Virginia credit for 20 years. The other points that are well taken. Let me ask you about more Capito. You were not kind to the former House Judiciary Chair who resigned to concentrate on the gubernatorial race. You flat out, you called him a quitter, very plain spoken, and you said it's just something you don't do.
Exactly.
So your take on more Capito.
Well, you don't quit, okay? 18,000 people voted for, or an 18,000 person district voted and put him in that position. And then right before this legislative section, in a session, in an election year, and he quits because then he can go raise money. You don't quit on a job like that, all right? I made the analogy to a major general in the military. That's who runs about an 18,000 person division. Mm-hmm. You don't have him quit right before he goes into an operation in Bosnia or Panama or whatever, and then he comes back and wants to be a 4-star general. Do you think that's going to happen? No. Okay, the people need to recognize, but my biggest beef with more Capito is he's using Larry Puccio as a campaign consultant.
Explain who Larry Puccio is, because that was my next question for you. It was a two-pronged criticism of Mr. Capito, and the second was about Larry Puccio.
And so Larry Puccio was the former head of the Democrat Party in West Virginia. He worked with Joe Manchin when Joe was Secretary of State, when he was governor, when he ran for Senate. He worked with Governor Tomlin. Then he worked with Jim Justice when Jim Justice was a Democrat. And he was the chair of the Democratic Party. We do not want, now that the state has gotten our politics in line with our conservative values, so now much of the state is Republican, we don't want to let Larry Puccio into the governor's mansion and start running things from inside. I see it as a Trojan horse. Let him into that governor's mansion. It may be more Capito as governor, but it's going to be Larry Puccio behind the scenes. I have a real problem with that, and I think the Republican Party of West Virginia is going to have a problem with that.
You've said it's a two-person race,
yes.
You and Chris Miller.
Yes.
What about Chris Miller makes him a worthy opponent? What makes him a part of that two-person race?
Chris Miller is a successful businessman, okay, and he brings that to the governor's office, and he looks at the governor's office through a businessman's perspective. Nothing wrong with that, but governments are run to be effective. Businesses are run to be efficient. They have a profit motive. They have to show at the end of the quarter profit and loss margins and so forth. And that's where Chris is coming from. And he said very clearly, he's going to try to cut personal taxes on day one. It's not a realistic perspective, okay? That may be a businessman's perspective to win points or whatever, to advertise, but it's not the way to run a government. A government has to be effective when there's a flood. You have to be able to take care of everybody, and I'm talking from the unborn to the senior citizens and everything in between, flood victims. You have to be effective. You're not looking there to make a profit. You're looking to take care of people, and that's the difference between the two of us.
You've helpfully led me to my next question. Thank you. I'm
Sure.
moving right into this year's legislative session, which just concluded. There were tax cuts that were passed, not entire tax cuts, but a percentage. There were teacher pay raises were involved. You had said you were in favor of both of those things. How would you grade what the legislature did, and how much further would you go, or do you think we're at where we need to be?
See, I'm very fond of the legislative process. In fact, my wife is in the legislature. Okay, now she's agreed not to run, but she's going to finish up this term. Mm-hmm. She's not going to quit that job.
I was going to point out she didn't resign.
But I'm very much in favor because we have now 100 single-member districts as opposed to the multi-member districts that we had before. So that's one. So we're getting the advice from people all over the state. Southern West Virginia is different than Northern West Virginia, the Eastern Panhandle. So you have that expertise coming in, and from all walks of life, okay? You have business people, you have lawyers, you have doctors, all that in that legislature. That's why I'm so fond of it. Then you have the same 34 senators. Mm-hmm. So I like that deliberative process, and when they have deliberated and brought their ideas forward, I'm going to be that team builder as governor, working with them to find solutions for West Virginia. So that's my belief in the legislative process. So dealing with taxes, I like Eric Tarr and his approach, and Vernon Criss, and the members of the legislature who are taking a disciplined approach, and they've put in triggers that if we get a certain amount of income coming in through the tax structure, then we can give further tax breaks. If not, then we won't, as opposed to just doing the politically expedient thing, which is say, oh yes, let's give everybody tax cuts. I think they're doing it in a very adult, professional manner, and I'm very much in favor of the way they're addressing it.
Every candidate for office needs money. I mean, you have to, you said Governor Justice spent $5 million in his campaign, $10 million the Club for Growth is pumping into the campaign for Attorney General Morrisey. You said you're not for sale.
Right.
Many times. That's almost like your motto,
Yes.
not for sale. How do you marry not for sale with please give me money to help me run for governor? Because both of those things can be true. So how do you put them into their own boxes?
The people of West Virginia are responding just fine. I've got a number of coalitions. I've got a Veterans Coalition. I've got a Women for Warner Coalition, gun owners for Warner, and also People of Prayer. So that ground game is what's important to me. It's votes that are going to win, not the Fifth Avenue style, let's send slick mailers out to everybody every day. People in the mailboxes are probably getting tired of seeing some of those. That is a propaganda machine that's generated. When you have $10 million, you can do that. What I want to do is talk to the churches. I want to talk to the veterans. I want to talk to the educators, the school teachers. That's who I'm talking to, and they're responding with great enthusiasm about my campaign. I see my signs going up all over, people asking for them. So I'm going to win with votes, not with the money.
You've graciously answered my questions. I appreciate that. I'm going to give you the last shot without me couching it in any way whatsoever. This is your moment to talk about why you should be the next governor of West Virginia.
I'm the one person who's trained, experienced, ready to go on day one. I don't have to learn on the job. To run in this Republican primary that we're facing on May 14th, I want people to understand that I have been a West Virginia Republican longer than the other three candidates combined, all right? I'm not a Johnny-come-lately. I've been at this my whole life as one of professional service, first in the military, then with the U.S. State Department overseas. I've run large organizations. I ran the world's largest rule of law program in Afghanistan, working with the Afghan Supreme Court, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Women's Affairs, and the Attorney General's office. That's what I'll be doing as governor, is overseeing large organizations, DHHR, DEP, transportation, highways, all those sorts of things. And I've learned you surround yourself with good people. That's what I've done in the Secretary of State's office. And I'm doing it with about 15% fewer people now than I had before. We're leveraging technology. That's what I intend to do in the governor's office, is make us an effective government system by surrounding myself with good people. And that's my plea to the people of West Virginia. Look at the candidates, compare our qualifications, our experience, and you'll see that there's one that stands head and shoulders above the others, and that's Mac Warner. I appreciate your support and your vote.
Military veteran, thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
By the way. Two-term Secretary of State and Republican gubernatorial candidate, West Virginia. Thank you for your time, Mike Warner.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Beyond the Podium. We'll have more coming up as we get closer to the primary. Have a great day.